meeting is serving as a combination of the meeting for both November and December. And Adriana, can we do a roll call?
Absolutely. Mr. Eric Davis.
Here.
Tyler Denham.
Here.
Karen Flores.
Here.
Andy Flores.
Here.
Jackie Kellogg.
Here.
Savannah McLaughlin.
Here.
Moses Milazzo.
Here.
Phaedra Parafinick. Okay, Rebecca Pierce. Ross Schaefer. Glenn Slivers.
Here.
Haley Zaroya. Oh, Sean, I skipped you. Sorry.
I'm here.
Okay, now Haley.
I'm here.
And Ross. Did we see Ross?
Here.
All right, we're good to go.
All right, thank you for that, Adriana. A few housekeeping reminders to start off. This meeting is being recorded. Please avoid using the chat box for general chatter. Instead, enter a C or Q if you have a comment or question during the meeting. Also, please keep yourselves muted if you're not speaking to avoid audio issues. And finally, if you need to leave the meeting early, please let me know so I can note the time for the meeting minutes and do a quorum check. And with that, we'll start with agenda item 3. Do I have a volunteer to read the land acknowledgement? And if I don't have a volunteer, I will volunteer someone. My voice is a little bit hoarse today, so I'll say.
I did it last time. I'll do it again.
Thank you, Jackie.
Tell me where it is again. Oh, right here. The Housing Commission humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by native descendants, border mountains sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place as home.
Thank you for that, Jackie. With that, we will move to agenda. We'll move to public comment. Adriana, is anyone queued up for public comment, or did you receive any public comment by email?
We did not.
Okay. In that case, we'll skip on to agenda item 5A, the consideration of approval of minutes for the commission meeting on October 27th. I will entertain a motion if someone has one.
I'll move to approve the minutes. I'll second it.
Okay, and who made the original motion?
Sorry, this is Haley Zaroya.
Okay, so I have a motion by Haley and seconded by Karen. Is there any discussion on the minutes? If no discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries and the minutes are approved. Next, we'll move to action and discussion items with agenda item 6A, an update on the Thorpe Park Annex from Rebecca Sayers, the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Director. So Rebecca, feel free to take over.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Sayers. I'm the Parks, Rec, Open Space, and Events Division Director. If you can bear with me a moment, I'm going to share my screen. And you are getting this hot off the press. We will be presenting this final Thorpe design concept to council next Tuesday for adoption, if they are interested in that. Hang on, I'm going to fix my screen so I can see you all as well. There we go. All right, so can you all see this okay? Seeing
I
some
can
head
see it just
nods.
fine.
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. Just let me know if I need to make it bigger. So last time I was here at your meeting in, must have been October, the end of October, and I was not able to, that was just public participation. So I wasn't really able to spend any time with you on the concept. So if I could bear with me to do that a little bit here, I just want to help orient you all with where we are on this map. So this part of the map here is a piece of Thorpe Park that was where the old public works yard was. So in relation to Thorpe Park, this is Benito Street over here. If you can see where my cursor is, it's over here on the east side. North is up. And Aztec Street, which goes up to the duck pond and a little parking lot up here. This is Aztec right here. The southernmost boundary street here is Dale Avenue. And this street here in the middle is Mogollon. That's the main entrance into the existing area that was the public works yard. We have the sustainability offices here in a building that used to be the solid waste offices. They plan on staying there, so they've been worked into the plan. We have another building here where we're eventually going to put some indoor basketball courts, hopefully. And this is a big garage type storage building where we used to house the solid waste trucks. And possibly the focal point for this concept plan is what was the old fleet building. It's where we used to do fleet maintenance. But it's a historical structure. If you've been by there, it's a really nice looking big stone, Malachi stone building. And that building is to remain. And the idea is to work with our local partners and Indigenous communities to turn this into an Indigenous cultural community center. That has been a common theme as we've gone through this entire year-long public engagement process. The council was very interested in that back in the beginning. It got a ton of community support. So that has been pretty consistent as we've gone through all phases of this process. Just to give you a little bit more information on the process itself, we started over a year ago. We had a few initial for the full public. We did some internal interviews, and then we had full public surveys and Zoom type meetings, and then we had 2 on-site meetings, including or exercises. One was like a build a park where we had this laid out with pieces to size that people could kind of place in like a puzzle of what they would like to see in the space. All of that culminated into 3 concept designs that we took back out to the public in another survey. And then we took all of those comments and coded them so we did have a facilitator hired for this process. They went through all that coding. We came up with the best options to come up with a final design that we took to council. They have tweaked it a little bit since then. And here we are, hopefully, with what council has requested and what they've heard from the community. I do want to note that one of the important things for council and the Indigenous community was plenty of natural area around this building. So we've included like pollinator gardens, space for them to have traditional ceremonies and teaching spaces. This outdoor flex space on the north side of the building has an incredible view of the peaks and is obviously very important to the Indigenous community. And so this would be a way for them to expand any ceremonies or festivals that they would like to have out into this outdoor space. There are walkways throughout. We're thinking that if we make some wider walkways here internally, we could have like indigenous markets or even like community or farmers markets spaces here. Just moving on around, we've got a walkway that connects to a new foots alignment. This will be realigned as part of the Rio de Flag project. Right now, it's you can see it here in the picture. It's down in the Rio. This brings it up out. It connects internally here, so we have this walkway all the way around for kind of a exercise loop or a walking loop. You may have seen a concept that had pickleball courts up in this corner. The council requested that those possibly be moved to, since we are relocating the Bark Park from the other part of Thorpe Park, which is along Thorpe Road. That's not a good location for a dog park. We can make this one better, but we could turn that old Bark Park space into pickleball courts, which the council feels is more appropriate. And I have to agree with them. Having pickleball here was just didn't feel like a compatible use with the focus on the Indigenous Community Cultural Center. But we do have some active recreation still included, especially that those types of activities that a lot of our Indigenous partners enjoy, like basketball and skate parks. So you'll see we'd like to do indoor basketball in this big garage area, expanding into community gardens. There's an existing greenhouse here already. This could become an orchard.
And the
And then a
paperwork
skate
to
park
be able to
and-
get an accommodation that would allow for a little bit more time. And so
I'm sorry, I'm getting, okay. And then a skate park and pump track. And for those of you who don't know, a pump track is more for, well, it's really for any wheel device, but it's kind of a track that would be like around the skate park, and it's got little bumps and whoop-de-doos. It's a pretty fun looking thing. And then the part that you all are most interested in, I will get to. That is the city employee housing. So because this property is already zoned public facility, the only kind of housing that is allowed without a rezoning is city employee housing. That's why we limited it to that. It's in this location because utilities exist here in Dale. They're more limited in other parts of the area. And we understand that there are some restrictions that we've been very open with council about. There's a previous ordinance that states that this property is part of Thorpe Park and should only be used for parks, recreation, and museum purposes. But that's an ordinance, and ordinances can be changed if a new council wanted to do so. And the other thing that I found out more recently is that the city did apply for land and water conservation grants to improve different areas of Thorpe Park. So where the softball fields are now and some of the other fields, those were all constructed using federal dollars. They included in the project area this part of the park. And so that's a problem because that means that this part of the park can only be used for outdoor recreation because it was included in the project area for Land and Water Conservation Fund. I have just started conversations with Arizona State Parks to see what our options are, if there's any type of conversion process. And that's why the council has asked us to leave city employee housing on here until we get through those conversations and really understand what that process might look like, what that might mean. Those are the two big hurdles there, but really, again, this is just a concept plan. So we're not in design. We haven't we haven't gone through the internal development process, right? Where you have to know how much parking you're going to have for the use. I mean, we've got some parking in here, but that might be enough or it might be too much. You know, those are all the things that we would go through when we start actual design. We're not there yet. I just want to help make that clear. So I feel like I have dragged you guys through this too much, and would love to stop there and take any questions or comments that you might have.
I'll go ahead and ask the first question. So is there a clear process for getting housing approved on the site, or is it all very preliminary, like you're not even sure what you're going to have to do in order to get permission to build city employee housing?
Thank you, Chairperson. Yeah, we're at the very, very beginning. I've had one conversation with State Parks. We have another one. And these conversations do include our legal team and our grants and contracts section director. We have another meeting scheduled next week, I want to say. And in between, we're emailing a little bit. So I've asked them for some more information. Over time, we've gotten like 4 different of these land and water conservation grants that had different maps included. I've asked them to combine those for us so that we're making sure that we're all talking about the right property, the right portions of the property. To me, that's just a first step. And then what the conversion process would even looks like. And I think what that looks like is if we removed a portion of this project area for housing, we would need to add land somewhere else for outdoor rec. So basically a land swap. We would need to make sure that we add land somewhere else of equal amount and value for where the housing portion would be. So not necessarily, this is about 8 acres in total, but just where the housing would be, we would need to make sure we add that as outdoor recreation somewhere else. So of course, my brain has got a lot of ideas going through about what that might mean. I don't know yet what might be acceptable to them or not.
Okay, and I see that Eric Davis has a question followed by Moises Malazzo.
I guess 2 questions is, do you have an idea of how many units could potentially fit in there? And then if housing is deemed where it cannot go there, what would the replacement be for it?
Great questions. Thank you so much. So we just kind of pencil, again, just keeping in mind this is concept only, we penciled in about 7 units here that our consultant felt like might fit. Keep in mind our consultant and sub-consultant is a landscape architect, so not an architect or engineer by any means. But this seemed appropriate. You know, it fits there along Dale Street where housing is right across the street. In turn, we've had a lot of questions about parking for the housing units themselves. And we haven't really talked to housing staff about what would be most appropriate. We're just not there yet. But I was kind of thinking like parking underneath and housing above or something like that to ensure that housing had the parking that they needed without taking it away from the park. And then the second question, if it is not city employee housing there, we would probably expand that parking lot. That was the initial, when we first went to council the end of October 25th, we provided them with 2 concepts that were exactly the same except for the housing piece. And where in the concept that did not have the housing piece, it was parking.
Okay.
And I think if we didn't do parking, it would probably be more of the native vegetation landscaped area that you're seeing in other places.
And Moses, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Tyler. So I actually have two questions, as Eric asked one of them, and then I got a follow up from that. The first one is that creation of the pickleball courts elsewhere, would that account for the new outdoor recreation, or do you have to actually find new land that is not currently used for outdoor recreation?
You want to be a Park and Rec employee, because that's exactly where my brain went too. I don't know yet. That's one of the ideas that we had. I have a feeling because it's already, if we're talking about putting the pickleball in the existing Bark Park, that's already outdoor recreation. I think they'll want something brand new, but I don't know that for sure yet.
Okay. And then the other question was, if this could not be housing, could you put solar there to help power the cultural center?
A great idea. Those types of ideas would honestly be worked out in the design. I think we could definitely look at solar over the parking lots, like similar to what we have at City Hall, and even at the Aquaplex. And I know that given the city's carbon neutrality plan, and I think you guys might be hearing more about that later in your meeting. So Jenny, you'll be proud of me. We have been thinking about where it would be great to be able to add solar if we can. But that would all come out in the design process, which would be the next step.
Okay, thank you.
I see that Devana has a cue in the chat.
Yeah, hi, thanks for that. I'm wondering, and you just kind of touched on it a little bit, I guess what the process is going forward. So this is concept, then design. Is there any money for this park project? I mean, how would it even move forward, and what would that timeline look like?
Thank you for that question. Hi, Devana, long time no see. Yeah, so the next step really is to take this to council next week for them to potentially adopt. And then we do have a little bit of money in this fiscal year budget, $100,000, that clearly this is an old public works yard, and we have done a lot of remediation, environmental remediation on this site already, but I think we would use that 100,000 to continue cleaning up the site. Once we have this concept in place, that helps us kind of focus our intention or our priorities, if you will. I think that we would probably start with the Indigenous Community Cultural Centers so that they could start, any local nonprofits could start maybe applying for grants to help get that building up and running and programmed. But in terms of any additional funding after that, there is none. So there's no real money for design or construction. That has been mentioned by a couple of council members that they would like to see this funded. We would certainly start talking with our partners in the capital improvements division, engineering division, to start seeing when we might, if we did get funding, when we could put that into the 5 to 20 year plan. And then we would start looking, also talk to our Parks and Recreation Commission, because we do have many parks that need development monies. We have quite a few of these similar types of concepts for other parks that are that have also not been developed. So working through them on priorities, and then start looking for additional grants and other funding sources, possibly a ballot measure. I think this is going to be a pretty expensive construction project. So we'd probably need to go to for a ballot measure for bond dollars at some point. But those are all steps for the future. Honestly, I'm trying to get us to concept right now, and then probably focusing on finding out the answers on housing. Absolutely, so that we know if we can do this or not. And then the Indigenous Community Cultural Center and getting the site cleaned up. Does that help?
Yeah, it did. Thank you. And then one more follow-up question. So if council approves the concept plan as presented with housing, and then y'all find out from your past grant funders that there's a compliance problem, would you essentially go back to council to approve a revised concept plan? Or what's the process, given that you don't know the impacts of the past funding?
Yeah, I think that would be the best thing to do, is to make, and really as a public notification, that now this concept needs to be revised because it's not going to be allowed on this site. And I would probably come back to this commission as well. Definitely going to start working more closely with housing as well. If it starts to look like we might have some options on the table for making this happen, we'll definitely start working with you all in housing more, and probably at some point kind of turn that over to them to develop as they see fit. Hope that wasn't a surprise, Sarah.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions, comments, or feedback for Rebecca? And if not, just to reiterate what Rebecca said, this will go before City Council on December 6th. Is that correct?
Next Tuesday, that's correct.
Okay, yeah, if you want to attend and give any feedback then. Yeah, but thank you so much for that presentation and the Q&A, Rebecca.
Thank you all for your time.
All right, so next up is discussion items with agenda item 6A, an overview of revisions to the carbon neutrality plan, with a presentation from Jenny Neiman, the Climate Program Manager. And Jenny, you can go ahead and take over, introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Chair Denham, and hello to the Housing Commission. I've heard from a number of you before, but I know many of you are also new, so welcome. And I really, truly look forward to working with y'all. So you're hearing from me twice today. The next item is an overview of the Sustainability Office and our work. This first one, we're doing a little bit more business about the Carbon Neutrality Plan revisions. I was able to provide a very brief overview last meeting, and so this is really just our meeting to get into details a little bit more and provide y'all with some time for feedback or any questions you have. So apologize. My name is Jenny Neiman. I'm the Climate Program Manager. So I sit over in the Sustainability Division, and I am in charge of meeting our climate goals. So I have been running this process to revise our carbon neutrality plan that I'm going to talk about y'all today. So first, just what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about why we're doing these revisions, talk about the types of revisions really broadly. There's not a ton of detail I don't think we need to get into on that. But then really, I really want to help the Housing Commission understand the revisions that are being proposed for the carbon neutrality plan as they relate to the housing plan. We're very, very excited about them and to kind of integrate these two documents. A real quick review, because I know a few of you are new to this, and deep apologies for pretty much all of what I'm going to say for those of you who are not. But the Flagstaff Carbon Neutrality Plan is our guiding document for achieving carbon neutrality, for achieving our climate goals, which have a lot wrapped up about, three main goals about, achieving carbon neutrality. So that's the mitigation side or the impact side, but also just ensuring that our systems and that our community is ready ready for climate change, right? And that we can build a resilient community while also thinking about our disproportionately impacted communities, which are often those most who are those in our communities who are most underserved. So we adopted this plan in June of 2021 and are already revising it. So that's what we're here to talk about today. When we adopted this plan, we committed to annual revisions. We have now less than 8 years to achieve some really ambitious goals. They are necessary goals and they are also deeply ambitious. And so we need to be checking in every year, and we will be checking in and revising this plan every year. This year, because we are only about a year in, we're still setting up our implementation. Revisions are limited and they really are administrative in nature. We are not doing big policy changes, right? We are not saying, you know what, we, decided we don't want to go this way with transportation or, with building energy efficiency. That's not the discussions we're having this year. We are just really doing a lot of administrative things. Just a little bit of timeline that can kind of speak about these revisions. We adopted our first climate plan. It was Flagstaff's climate plan, as well as the first community climate plan in Arizona in 2018. That was the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. About 1 month before adoption, we got new science. New science is always good, if poorly timed for our purposes. But the new science basically said we need to move more quickly as an international community. Flagstaff is a city within that international community. And so it basically said all cities and all communities need to move much more quickly. We decided to move forward with just adopting the climate plan that we had on the table. And we kind of wrote in there, we need to come back and talk to the community about this. And how do we work with this new science and this new sense of urgency? Well, the community came back to us about a year later. They started a petition and asked for council to declare a climate emergency. That petitioning started in 2019. They came to council with a couple of hours of testimony in 2020. And that led to the declaration of a climate emergency in June 2020. We took about a year and we developed the carbon neutrality plan. That plan focused just on emission reductions, just on carbon neutrality. And we said for the resilience conversation, for the adaptation conversation, how we adapt to these huge changes that we're seeing, not only in our environment, but also in our systems. So in our housing systems, right? As the Phoenix area gets hotter and hotter, it's one of our greatest climate risks, right? Is that our stressed housing infrastructure will be even further stressed. How do we think about all of that? Right. And we said, right now we're just talking emissions and we're going to rely on the 2018 cap. And that is the first climate plan. And then we will combine those documents. And now we are here to combine them. And that is the main focus of this revision. As part of that, also, after the carbon neutrality plan was adopted, the 10-year housing plan was adopted. We were deeply excited about this. Housing is so deeply related, but it wasn't quite done yet when we were adopting the carbon neutrality plan. And so we see this as an opportunity to also integrate that new information about the housing plan into these revisions. So I realize that was a lot, but a little bit said in a different way, I guess. We have 3 types of revisions that we're making this year. Again, all administrative in nature. We're adding new information. So we have new information about financial investment. We have new information about partner commitments. And AU, for example, has also committed to carbon neutrality by 2030. That will make everything a lot easier, particularly on the building perspective. And adoption of the 10-year housing plan is one of those pieces of new information. We also have standard annual revisions that we'll do every year. And so this is our emissions inventory, which is kind of just our accounting of our emissions and how we're doing against our goals. And then finally, what I kind of spoke about before is combining the climate action adaptation plan, our first plan, with the carbon neutrality plan. So today we're really just going to focus on that third line there, which is the adoption of the 10-year housing plan. So what we have done, and I'm really proud to say, we were so excited about the housing plan, and we are not the housing policymakers, right? Nor is our commission. That's y'all. And so what we did is we really just incorporated the policies and goals from the housing plan into the revised carbon neutrality plan. We tried really, really hard not to create any new content, right? But to really just do a lot of copy and paste. And we worked with housing and housing staff to do that, to pick the right information that should come over. You know, one thing we did write new content on is just the connections between climate change and climate action, and kind of breaking them down among these 3 areas of focus. So that's equity, emissions, and resilience. And I showed this slide last time, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but the idea is that these things are just deeply interconnected. And so the revisions that we made a new target area. And those are kind of our sections or chapters of the plan in the way that you all have policy initiatives. We made a new target area just on housing. We made new strategies. So that's create, connect, preserve, and protect to represent the strategies and policy initiatives of the housing plan. And again, we really just did a copy and paste. So these are the previous strategies in the carbon neutrality plan as it sits today before the revisions. There are 9 of them. And what it's going to look like when it's revised, we do go to council next week. So it's very good we were able to squeeze it in this meeting. The revisions will actually have 15 target areas. So again, these are basically the areas that we're working on, right? And so there's a red star with housing for all. That is what staff suggested we call it, and we loved it. But the other ones are actually deeply related to housing, as well as housing is related to so many things. Inclusive recreation, as Rebecca was just speaking about, we all got very excited about bringing that in, and it's obviously related to complete neighborhoods, right, and to health and to safety, as well as economic prosperity, healthy forests and open spaces, water security, and then health and safety itself. So the other 5 stars here represent those 2018 Climate Action Adaptation Plan target areas that we are pulling in that really focus on resilience. So they are not new content either. They are really just how we are combining these 2 plans. Housing for All is really the only new target area that wasn't in either plan, but obviously is in the 10-year housing plan. So this is what it looks like. It sits within our neighborhoods focus area, which we had already had. And so housing for all and inclusive recreation are the new pieces of that. And then it's a full target area, just like those other elements of our plan. So we do hold housing as highly as, let's say, electric mobility or clean electricity, for example. We really wanted it to have this focus. This content is all directly from the housing plan. You likely recognize this graphic, as well as the housing as a collective benefit. That all came directly from there. And I wanted to note this. This is a slide or a page from the housing plan on the left side, and a page from the climate plan on the right side, just so you all can see exactly how this is working. Essentially, we are using the policy initiatives. They have become strategies. And then the items under here, strategies, we have a bit of different terminology. Those we have under word for opportunities for action. So hopefully this feels all right to you and pretty clear. Again, we really just want to represent the housing plan within the climate plan and make really, really clear the connections between the 2. That is all I have for you. So I would love to answer any questions or just hear any thoughts y'all have.
And I see that sorry, my voice is a bit hoarse. That Moses has a cue in the chat.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you. Jenny, this is great. Thank you so much. I was wondering if you all were hoping that there would be a sort of reciprocal process with the housing plan to go through and try to inject additional climate action responses from the climate plan into the housing plan, or if that's even necessary.
Yeah, I want to defer to housing staff on that, right, as it relates to the housing plan, certainly. I don't know that we see it as necessary. I think that we have a tight collaboration, right, between our teams right now, and I think we feel really good about moving forward on both of these goals together. As Sarah said, kind of, it's the and. But I want to defer to Sarah. Oh, Sarah's hand is up. Perfect. Thanks, Sarah.
Are you on mute, Sarah?
No, I was just making sure it was my turn to talk. Thank you, Chair.
No worries.
Commission, for those of you I haven't met yet, my name's Sarah Dyer, I'm the Housing Director, and I think we're in, to answer your question, Moses, is we were in a little bit of a different position is because the carbon neutrality plan had already been approved before we were writing the housing plan, and we were in a position to be able to take many things in the carbon neutrality plan into consideration when we were writing the housing plan. And so we actually had significant participation from sustainability staff, including help with editing, help with ways to incorporate things that were in the carbon neutrality plan. So Jenny showed you the timeline. Carbon neutrality was approved here, housing plan approved here. We've already done a lot of the incorporating. If things come up that would be beneficial to be included through our annual planning process related to the 10-year plan, we'll be able to include those as we go.
Thanks, Sarah. That was actually my memory as well, was that we had looked at that multiple times. I just wanted to ask the question in honor of this being a public and open meeting and make sure that that conversation is remembered and brought back up. Thank you.
Okay, and I see that Adra has a has a hand up.
Hi. Yeah, my question, Jenny, is, so when you guys incorporated some things with housing, did you guys look at, some of this? I know we've talked about some of these things about like maybe changing building codes to allow, more, housing on top of businesses, or to allow more structures on a single property or things along those lines. What were your guys' just kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Audra. So a lot of that is already in the carbon neutrality plan. The carbon neutrality plan, I hope the Housing Commission will find, is a great friend to housing in that it is all for density, it is all for infill, it is all for having, hard conversations in our community about where do we let people live, what kinds of housing is legal, right? So that is actually all really integrated, I think, into the carbon neutrality plan. What we did not do is, when working with staff on this process, is create new policy. This was not to develop both the housing plan and the carbon neutrality plan. Thousands of community members were involved, right? Hours and hours of public comment, et cetera, et cetera. So what we didn't want to do was change policy. And so we really just copied and pasted. And we actually did not change any of the existing carbon neutrality plan policies. I didn't mention that, but that's probably really important. So we didn't touch our transportation sections, right, for instance, or renewable energy sections. That was not kind of within the scope of this. We will be having those conversations when we do future revisions, right? So future revisions, we will put it all on the table and say, what's not working, right? What do we need to be stronger about, right? Where do we need stronger policies? And it's really possible that we need stronger language and stronger policy support around density and around infill, right? And around single family zoning or not. Right. I think we're really open to those conversations, but we did not dive into that in this process just because we were really trying to keep it administrative. But again, I hope that, again, the carbon neutrality plan speaks a lot about the need for greater density and the need to really look at our existing neighborhoods specifically, which is most of our land, right? That's single family housing.
And is there a plan, like the next revision? When is that planned for?
Yes, so that will be, we will take that, basically do that every fall. Every fall, we will do this check-in process. So fall 2023, we will be back. I don't know the exact scope of it. We've been thinking about possibly doing it just an equity-focused review and revision, right? To say like, we're just talking equity. We're not even talking emissions right now. We're just talking equity. In which case would be a really awesome way to collaborate for y'all, with y'all, just because of the focus and the ties there. But yes, fall 2023, we will be doing our next round of revisions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jenny. I appreciate you guys answering my question.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions, comments, or feedback? I'll give a moment to put a Q in the chat or raise a hand. All right, if not, then next up is general business with agenda item 7A, an informational presentation on the sustainability division. And yeah, we're right back to Jenny for this one.
It's me again. I apologize. But you know, Adriana and the housing team offered us this opportunity to kind of introduce the sustainability office, particularly because there are so many intersections between our work, and I am so deeply grateful for that. I regret actually that I don't have all of my team here with me, because, and that's the whole sustainability team. We will introduce them, but we wanted to bring everyone just because this is important, right? And we really want to build relationships with y'all. So they all send their regrets. It's a little bit of a crazy week on our side of the house, but really, I'm just going to talk about who we are, and we have 5 program areas. And my goal today is really just to help the commissioners, you know, think about how we work in the community and how we can all work together, basically, right? You know, I'm going to be talking about a lot of things that we do, and that's not so much so that you remember it all, right? Or say like, oh, they're doing great things. It's more just like, how can we intersect, right? And how do we intersect? You know, the Housing Commission's charge is broad, right? You all think about everybody that lives in a house in Flagstaff, in my view. And so how do we kind of work together? So I will start with this. These are the same goals as in our carbon neutrality plan, but they are the goals that we work on as a division. So we say the sustainability office, it is a division. I will interchangeably talk about the climate team and the sustainability team. We kind of see everyone as working on climate, and it's so tied to health and well-being. So we really align around that. But, you know, our main goals are about reducing our impact, helping us prepare for a rapidly changing future, and building a resilient community, and then supporting disproportionately impacted groups, right? Climate change is primarily a problem for the world's poor, right? It is primarily a problem for those who have been underserved and marginalized. It is a problem for everyone, but the world's poor will see the worst impacts and the first impacts. So they have to be a critical part of our work moving forward. So just diving in a little bit to those 3 concepts, mitigation is really about reducing our impact. So this comes into my work on the climate team, but also, you know, we have community stewards, right, that do litter cleanups all the time, right? That's also about our impact. We also have folks that work on waste and food, and so that's about our consumption. And, you know, it's really just about thinking about how our choices matter, both from a policy side as well as from an individual side. I don't like to deal in kind of guilt. It's not helpful. It's not productive. The science shows it's not productive, right? And so how can we think about both empowering ways to think about climate change, right? As well as the policy decisions, right? That could get us out of this sort of individual mindset. Resilience is that next concept, and we know that climate change affects essentially all of our systems, right? Everything will change, whether that's, you know, infrastructure and increasing freeze-thaw cycles, right, on our pavements, meaning that we need to spend more public dollars, you know, paving roads, right, as we are building more roads. How do these things all intersect together? As to, you know, just the, you know, asthma, someone with asthma, right, and how, you know, they may suffer if they don't have good insulation on on their home, how they might suffer on a hot day, how they might suffer when we have wildfires, right, or increases in allergens, right? So it's deeply broad. And what we really like to think about here, though, is not just about the risks and the threats, but how are we more resilient, right? How do we build better? We don't just want to bounce back, right, from an emergency, right? We want to think about long-term change and changing the status quo, because the status quo doesn't work for a lot of people today. And then equity, I spoke to this a little bit more, but it's really critical that not only do people not face the same threats, right? So your threats could be different based on your neighborhood, right? We certainly continue to see this, whether it's fires or flooding, but it also can be different based on the language you speak, right? Or your immigration status, or your physical ability, or your race, right? And that can be because of challenges someone faces today, that also can be because of historic marginalization. And so we need to think about not only threats, but also about the ability to adapt is really different, right? If you don't have a lot of money in your bank account, it may be really hard for you to evacuate if you don't feel comfortable going to a shelter, right? And that's all a mix of a whole lot of different factors that would affect somebody in that way. So we have 5 program areas, and I will continue to return to these program areas, but they are climate and energy, which are obviously deeply related. Community stewards, that's our litter cleanup. That's a little cleanups. They are little cleanups and large. They could be 1 person or 300. Our neighborhood sustainability grants, etc. But waste reduction and then food systems, that team really works together too. These are just programs. All the folks that I wanted to bring with me today are here. Our full-time staff are in blue. And then we are actually really fortunate to have a number of AmeriCorps volunteers in our office, whether they're Vistas or just AmeriCorps service volunteers. And so these are our teams that work on our different programs, again, climate and energy, community stewards, and waste and food. Nicole Antonopoulos is our director. So she's over there on the left and kind of works on it all. But really quickly, we have Ramon Alatorre, Jenna Ortega, myself, Gracie Reckheimer is our AmeriCorps Vista, but that's the climate and energy team. Steve Thompson and Sonoma Boynton are our community stewards. Waste reduction and food systems is staffed by Kaylee Wells, Summer White, and Jacob Ratz. So these are the folks that I get to work with, and I really hope that you all get to know them. Now I'm going to go through, it's going to be a little bit of a rapid fire, but I will go through each of these programs and just the ways that they interact with the community, the ways that they might interact with housing, etc. All right, so again, the climate action program, that is what we really just spoke about with the carbon neutrality plan. But our goals are the same, right? Reducing our impact, preparing for change, and supporting our vulnerable community members. Carbon neutrality plan. I didn't really say this when we spoke before, but our goal is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. That is a goal that we will achieve by pretty much reducing our emissions by about 50%, which is in line with the scientific targets that we need to maintain a safe climate. We will solve the rest of that emissions reduction through carbon dioxide removal, which is actually taking carbon dioxide out of the air. It's technology that we do not know how to do yet, and we do not know how it works. And there's a lot of bright minds across the international community working on this, but it's a risky bet in a lot of ways. We need to prepare, and then we need to think about those most impacted. Just a really quick kind of context, our climate is changing. We've already seen the changes in Coconino County. Changes are increasing in speed, right, versus anything we've ever seen in the past. And these are the main ones that Flagstaff will see. What's not written here, but should be, because it's everything, it's climate change across the world, is just the increase in extreme events, right? So there's more energy in the atmosphere, and we will see an increase in extreme events. That can be, deep 4-foot snowstorms, right? Like that counts as an extreme event, right? As in addition to, the extreme rainfall, obviously, that a lot of us are familiar with after the last 2 years. One thing I want to specify as our core focus, I'm going to talk about kind of what we think about with a lot of our programming, but we cannot do this work with the I think 7 full-time staff that you saw on the earlier slide, right? That will never get us to the climate changes that we need, right? And so our core job is helping our community to move forward with climate change, right? And that really starts with climate conversations. And so I try to talk about this in every single aspect. There's been studies that like folks want to talk about climate, but they don't, like, right? Or they think it's too political, or they think other people aren't thinking about it, et cetera. And so most of our work is really just about starting these conversations and finding what are the levers for change to help people move forward, right? What is it that you might care about? I'm not going to read in this, but you know, climate communication is really part of probably my main job, right? Is figuring out how we talk to the community about climate change, whether that's, you know, the operators at the water plant, right, that are my colleagues, or if it's, you know, folks and businesses thinking about how they prepare, et cetera. You know, and so a lot of what we do is help people find their why, right? So what is your why for caring about climate change, right? Is it that you like to go fishing, right? Or you care about your grandkids, or maybe you're a data person, or maybe you're scared, right? But everybody has a why. And so that's really the focus of our work, is helping people to kind of find the why and moving us into a new system. You know, we're not talking about small things here, right? It's not, you know, oh, we just need to recycle, right? It's we need to fundamentally change all of our systems and structures. And so we've got to have a lot of backing behind that. Once we find that why, we try to help people move forward. And so, you know, ideally climate action is taking it at the international, federal, state, and local level, right? But it's also taken throughout our community. And so we try to talk about all these different groups that can take climate action. This is where I'm gonna start to roll pretty quickly, but you know, one of those things, and as I said, it won't, climate change and the system change we need will not happen through our staff alone, right? It will happen through community leadership. And so we have a lot of different programs that support community leadership. We essentially run like a semester-long course through sustainability leaders. You can come in and meet with us for 8 weeks or 3 hours and, you know, learn all kinds of things about how to take climate action, or you can join us for a night at Climate Ambassadors or the Resilience Project to really learn about how to talk about climate change, how to take climate action. We do a lot of work with youth. We have a youth summit that we're deeply proud of. We are trying to push policy forward. So whether that's, you know, clean electricity, building electrification, energy efficiency is really the one that will happen through building codes. Our hands are tied in a lot of ways due to state legislative control, not unlike housing, land use change, infill and density, to our earlier conversation, as well as long-term change planning, right? How are we thinking about, you know, when it heats up in the valley and we see much more visitation, right, in the summer months, as Phoenix is dealing with, you know, more and more days over 120 degrees, for instance, right? How are we thinking about that as community? How are we having those hard conversations? We also try to think about on the transportation side, you know, electric mobility is important. Electric buses are the most important. Scooters are really important, right? And then electric vehicles. But the most important thing that we need to do, and the hardest thing to do, is to decrease our dependence on cars. We are a car-dependent community, like most communities in the US. And there are a lot of people in our community who do not use cars and who do not have high access to cars. And so how do we support them, as well as helping other people have less reliance on cars? We talk a lot about change, and this is why I love working with my housing friends, because housing, you all also talk about change, right? And so how do we think about change? How do we celebrate change, right? How do we think about our existing land uses? How do we think about the ways we get around town, right? Scooters are one example of that, right? But so are duplexes. How we get around town matters too. You know, electric cars are really wonderful, but they don't help folks who can't afford a car, right? So how do we think about buses? How do we think about transit? How do we think about how are we planning? And then we also provide a lot of support internally to help us. We have renewable energy projects. We do reviews of development projects, just as like housing staff, et cetera. That's climate. Community stewards. So this is really just helping people become active stewards of our community and kind of take part in, you know, keeping our community the beautiful place that it is. We have a lot of ways we do this. Probably the two best things that we do as an office are give money to the community. So we give about $50,000 away in neighborhood sustainability grants. And those are to a lot of different groups at the community, and the Sustainability Commission runs that program. And then we have what we call the E3 grant. Right now, this has been supporting cats of Flagstaff, and they have been doing litter cleanups, right? And so we're able to get that money out into the community for a community organization to do this better than we would, essentially. We have a lot of different events that are about community steward, a lot of different ways to clean up your community, litter cleanups, flood mitigation as well. We've been organizing response volunteer days, etc. We also, again, I mentioned this before, but you can adopt an avenue, you can adopt a foots trail, you can adopt a section of the Rio now as our newer program. We also have winter snowplate stewards to help clean up broken sleds, for example. Energy conservation, again, there are a lot of intersections here with climate. We provide rebates to help people upgrade their homes. We have significantly expanded our rebate program in the last year due to some federal program funding. We added increased funding for income qualified households. Home energy efficiency workshops, these are really like small things you can do that are free or almost free. We give away a bag of supplies to help people caulk their windows, right? We try to focus on things that renters can do, et cetera, to just reduce their energy bills, essentially. I'm not going to get into this, but there are a lot of rebates around for electrification, both from the city as well as federally. So if you want to talk more about that, we could talk probably all day, but this is the way we need to move forward. We need to electrify our buildings incredibly quickly. The city is providing incentives to do that, but the feds are providing much more significant incentives now. Food systems. It's hard to grow food in Flagstaff, right? For a lot of different reasons. And what we want to do is help and support people in growing that food. We have 3 community gardens, Benito Street, Isabel Street, and Southside. We have an urban farm initiative to support local businesses and co-op and composter rebate coops, not co-op, chicken coops. You can get a rebate for a chicken coop. So we're trying in a lot of different ways to help improve our food systems. Materials management, so we work really closely with Public Works and Solid Waste in helping people to recycle. We have another guiding document, the Rethink Waste Plan, which has a goal of diverting 90% of the material produced in Flagstaff from the landfill by 2050. So aggressive goals, but there are really, really strong financial benefits to moving out the date that we need to build a new landfill. Right, in terms of costs for members of our community, if we can push out the date that we need to build a new landfill by a decade or 2 decades, there's huge cost savings there, right? And so there's actually a deep, deep financial benefit to doing this work. Our team supports this in a ton of different ways through a ton of communication, events. Our website has all kinds of stuff about everything you can recycle. We also support folks with composting and food scraps drops off. We have fix-it clinics where people can fix your lamp or your shoes or your stereo. Finally, we try to elevate community voices whenever we can. We have a number of different advisory groups that we're really proud of that provide us with essentially advice from the equity, business, or youth perspective. We also have the Sustainability Commission. And then finally, we talk a lot about what residents can do and how they can do things. And so that's really the final piece that I will leave y'all with. Our goal is to try and make really to not ever use the word sustainability, frankly. Our goal is to talk to people about how action, like this can make their lives better, right? And can make their communities better. And so that is really the main goal there, right? We want to make our community better. We put climate spin on it sometimes, but at the end of the day, we are working on the same things as the Housing Commission and our housing friends over there are. So that's what I have. We have a lot of different websites, information. We have a monthly newsletter about all of our events and all of our volunteer opportunities. I can put the link into the chat, but I think I'm at time. So I would love if you all have any questions about any of the work we do.
In the chat from Moses.
I think Jackie's hand might have gone up before I put my
Oh, yeah, I saw the order. Yeah, go ahead, Jackie. Then Moses.
You can go first. Mine's real quick. How is the community garden How's it going? Is it working for how you had anticipated? Is there participation? And do you want a chicken coop? Because I will give you a chicken coop.
Um, Thanks, Jackie. Good question. So the community gardens, we have, again, 3. They've been pretty great. We have seen, particularly in the pandemic, right? People wanted to get their, hands dirty. We were fully, I believe, sold out of our plots in the community gardens amongst all 3 locations. So they have been going really well. I don't work super closely on that side, but we've actually really increased sort of our gardening days and our cleanup days. We also now during the warm season, collect food scraps at those gardens. And so we've been having great conversations with Southside as well about how to really integrate that garden into their kind of neighborhood, right? And into that community. I will let them know about the chicken coop. They might, because we take demonstration chicken coops everywhere. So I will let them know. And I do have your email, Jackie. I'm going to write that down.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, and then you can go ahead, Moses.
Thank you. So my question is related to housing and related to landfill reduction. One of the things that I have seen a lot of at the landfill is construction debris. And a lot of it is recoverable and reusable, but there are some really massively restrictive rules about at the landfill about reusing or taking anything, right? It's essentially you'll get fined if you touch anything that you're not throwing away. And it's kind of incredibly wasteful, and it would be helpful with reducing costs to building housing if some of that housing waste could be recycled and reused and resold. And I know a number of small business construction companies who would like to be able to purchase, wood and other things that they could reuse, but there's no such option here other than Eric's, and that's, just kind of a very limited in what you can actually get there. And so I'm curious if you could go into a little bit more detail about some of the reduction of landfill usage that you're talking about and considering.
Thank you, Commissioner Milazzo. Yeah, I would be happy to. I'm really glad you bring it up. It is a big challenge and huge challenge. There's a huge amount of waste from construction and demolition, right? And we put together a construction and demolition working group. Oh gosh, probably 4 years ago now at this point, that tried to talk through these issues, right? And how we get there, right? And how we move forward. There are a number of ideas in this sort of ether. One of them is, incentives, right? And so we have, as we discussed last year, we have a new incentive program, and it focuses on construction and demolition waste because it is one of our abilities, right? One of the things that we can impact essentially, right? Without having a ton of control. So right now, the recycling center on Butler Avenue, that will likely change pretty soon. The contract is up for that recycling center, and there are a lot of challenges with that center. There is a lot of discussion right now about what that center becomes, right? And could it be a sort of specialized place for certain types of waste, right? Construction and demolition, possibly, though it's probably not the right setting. I am not familiar enough with the results of that working group, but I can definitely follow up. And I just appreciate the question because it is a huge amount of waste. It is a huge amount of emissions, right? To create all of that material, right? And then for it to not be reused. But to your point about housing costs and folks being able to use that, it feels like, yeah, it would need to be a sort of on-site landfill, right? Or on the landfill site kind of collection. And there obviously are a lot of rules and things we need to get through with the landfill. But I promise it is on our mind, but I will follow up, Commissioner Milazzo, if that's all right, and connect you with our folks about, who are really thinking about this, because unfortunately I'm not the one, but we are trying to get there through incentives, and we have a lot more work to do.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
If no one else has a comment or a question, I have one. So Ginny, it feels to me like a lot of the bigger items that the Sustainability Office wants to accomplish require, changes to land use, which in turn requires, changes to our zoning code. Does the Sustainability Office have any kind of intentional plans to interface with the upcoming zoning code audit in order to, push through those changes or advocate for those changes that you need?
Yes, so I'm thrilled that you know about that. And Chair Denham, we are actually a co-partner in that. And so that sort of zoning code analysis is a joint project by housing and sustainability, as well as our planning friends. And so housing and sustainability brought joint funding into that to look at the codes from both a housing and a sustainability perspective, right? And for those who don't know, right, we are, really doing an analysis of the codes to say we have these very aggressive and deeply important goals on housing and climate. What is getting in our way, right? Where are we getting in our own way because of housing, right? One easy requirement is parking, or one easy example is parking requirements, right? Isn't doing good things for climate or housing, right? And so how do we think about that, about our own codes and those changes to make? And so what will happen in that zoning code analysis is we will be going through all the codes and all the standards related to development and looking at it from both a housing and a sustainability standpoint. Again, in a lot of ways, we know that our goals are the same. And there may be other ways that they may conflict, right? And we'll work through that. But yes, we are co-partners and we are deeply excited about that work that frankly can't come soon enough, right? Because we have a lot of work to do on both ends.
Yeah, and I'm actually curious to hear more details about how the process will work, because I've been a bit confused on this, because I know that, both the Housing Plan and Sustainability Office, they've got a list of things, these are goals we already have, and, that entails, it doesn't get into specifics, but there's a lot of places where plans have already been made, say like, oh, we need to change these things in the zoning code. But at the same time, my understanding is the zoning code audit will be driven by a consultant. So how's that interaction going to be? Are you going to be like feeding the consultant, like, oh, these are changes we think need to be made? Or are you just going to be handing goals off to the consultants? Like, these are the goals we want to achieve, and you tell us what changes need to be made in the zoning code? Or is it going to be sort of a combination of the two? Is it not going to be so strict? Like, you could both propose goals and specific changes?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Chair Denham, and any other staff that want to weigh in, feel free. I think the short and easy answer is we do not know yet. So we have not even begun the procurement process. We've been working on the scope, right? But we will do an official procurement process. We will do a request for statement of qualifications, which means we have flexibility on kind of how we work with this consultant once we understand their skill set, et cetera. But to your point, absolutely, right? We're not going to, I don't imagine that staff wouldn't volunteer the things that need to change, right? If they know them, right? And we've already had a lot of conversations internally about that, of like, yeah, these are the ones that are priorities, or these are the ones to hit first, right? And so I think that it will be a lot of back and forth. But again, we're very, very early in the process. And so we do not have all of that interaction ironed out yet, and it will be an ongoing conversation.
Okay, thank you for that. And I just want to check, Jackie, is your hand up because you have another comment or question?
Is it down now?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know I had to undo it once sorry.
Oh, no worries. All right, does anyone else have a comment or question before we move on to the next item? All right. Well, thank you so much for that, Jenny. Moses has a comment to see in the chat.
I just wanted to say this is fantastic, and thank you.
Thank you all just for the opportunity. We see so much good work being done kind of by housing, and we just want to keep supporting that, and really please do not hesitate to ever reach out to me or just that general inbox, and you'll get to the right person. If y'all have any questions or concerns or want to chat, yeah, there's much good collaboration to come.
Yeah, I'll reiterate that. Thank you so much for the presentation and the Q&A. And next up is informational items, starting with agenda item 8A, an update from the Housing Authority Commission member. And Moses, do you have any updates for us?
We haven't met in quite some time, and so unless Sarah has something that I missed the last meeting, so Sarah maybe could say a couple words about what happened at the last meeting, but we have not been able to, we just got enough commissioners to actually be able to get quorum if we're missing one or two people. So that's good, but the last time we were going to meet, we didn't have any new business, so we canceled the meeting.
Thank you, Moses. I was actually on vacation for the last meeting, but the Housing Authority Board met and approved the new rent schedule for 2022 as published by HUD with a 20% exception rent. And we reviewed the utility allowances. And so it was to accomplish the minimum amount of business we needed to do because we are having a hard time achieving quorum. However, with the newly appointed members, we'll be meeting more regularly.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. Sorry. Moving on to agenda item 8B then, updates from housing commissioners and other informational items. Do any of the commissioners have an update to give? If not, I have an update. So I'm just going to reiterate an email that Adriana sent out earlier this week, or sent out last week. I am personally hosting a discussion on parking reform this coming Friday at 9 a.m. If you choose to attend, just keep in mind that we're responsible for abiding by open meeting laws. And the easiest way to do that is if you do attend, just to avoid direct discussion about city business and to only ask clarifying questions. I do believe Adriana posted a notice of possible quorum just in case, just to be safe. And if you want to see the invite details, they're in the email that Adriana sent out. And I'll give another moment for any of the other housing commissioners if they have an update. All right, then on to agenda item 8C, updates from the housing staff. And I believe that Justina Costa has an update on the 10-year housing plan. And you can go ahead and talk.
Thank you. You read my mind. Hi, everyone. I'm Justina Costa, one of the assistant housing directors. I actually have two updates. The first is regarding the 10-year housing plan implementation plan. I know you've all been eagerly awaiting to hear from us about that. We are now, as you heard last month, fully staffed, and Adriana Fisher has trained our new employee and is now able to focus on that implementation plan. So our goal is to have that in front of you next or in January. Because there is no meeting in December. So we'll have that in front of you for consideration and discussion in January. The second item I wanted to chat about was the bond, the housing bond. As you know, that got approved by the voters less than a month ago. And we are currently in the process of defining exactly what that process looks like in order to access and begin spending those funds. And so we will have, again in January for you, a plan with that money and what that's going to look like. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has about either of those two topics.
And before anyone asks a question, I just want to note for the meeting minutes that Adra needs to drop off at 2:20. So note that for the meeting minutes. And does anyone have a comment or follow-up question for Justina? All right, if not, I see that Christine also has a C in the chat. I believe she has an update for us.
There, thanks, Chair Denham. I do. I just have a quick update. So my first update is about the American Rescue Plan Act, coronavirus, state and local fiscal recovery funds. I'm sure you all remember that council had directed $1.9 million to go towards housing assistance, and we were able to release a notice of funding availability for that in early November. Applications will be due December 19th, and then staff will do an evaluation to make sure that they're all eligible. And then after that, we will send them on to a ranking committee to rank and score them. We'll discuss them and then determine how to award those funds out. So our hope is that council will be approving contracts for those funds in March, depending on how long it takes to draft the contracts. On top of that, we also have our community development block grant process, which we are going to be kicking off. We have new council members and a new mayor, so we will be starting off with a meeting, I believe it's the January 17th meeting, where we're going to just kind of give an overview of the community development block grant program and then ask them to set their specific priorities for those funds for the next 2 years. And so in the past, it's been things like workforce development, neighborhood revitalization, and homeless services. And then, now we have the bond, and so council may choose to prioritize CDBG funds for other things. We'll see what happens. After that, we'll release a notice of funding availability for those funds with applications usually due back in mid-February. We rank those throughout the month of March and then go to council for providing recommendations in early April. One thing that I am hoping to ask of you all is to consider if you might be able to volunteer to be on one of those ranking committees. It can be anywhere from reading about 3 to sometimes 7 proposals, and then using our matrix to score them and provide your points and comments. And then we usually meet for sometimes half a day, sometimes an entire day to discuss them. And so if you're at all interested in serving on either of those ranking committees, either in January or in March, dates to be released or to be determined, I would love to chat with you about the process if you have questions, and we would just really appreciate your service in either of those volunteer roles. So feel free to email me or email Adriana and she can connect us. Thanks.
Thank you for that update. And I see that Jennifer has a C in the chat.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Jennifer Michelson, housing analyst. I just had a baby update about the Habitat for Humanity starter home pilot project that's being built on a small city lot and in the south side off of Butler on O'Leary Street. If you guys have driven by and seen the progress, it's looking really good. It's just that first house, there will be a second one that will go up later in 2023. That'll be their next one. But it sounds like they have selected a home, or I'm sorry, they've selected a family to buy the house. The Habitat for Humanity board will approve this household for purchase on their December 8th board meeting. And so we're really close there. I think in January that transaction will actually happen, and we'll be working on those documents to get that new homeowner in that house. So I can confirm that later after that happens, and there'll probably be more news about that second unit as well. And another exciting thing is they're putting solar panels on top of, I just saw the building permit go through for solar panels for that first house. So yeah, that's just wanted to relay that information about that unit. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the update. Are there any other members of staff that have an update to give? I see a C in the chat from Adriana.
Sorry, buttons are kind of sticky this afternoon. I just wanted to thank everybody. We had 12 commissioners at this meeting. one of them completely unexpected. And I just wanted to thank you all and thank you to our presenters. I think everybody did an amazing job. Very thoughtful questions. And yeah, thanks.
Yeah, well, with that, we're at the end of the meeting, and I'll echo what Adriana said. Thank you guys so much. See you in January, and have a happy holidays. And yeah, we'll call it. This meeting is adjourned at 2:25 p.m. Everyone have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye. Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
Happy
Thanks,
holidays.
everybody.